Welcome. I'm very excited today because the short-term rental loophole is something that we really get excited about. And I've talked about this a lot, and we've saved our clients tens of millions of dollars with this strategy, but it's not all fun and games here. Now, it used to be a much easier strategy, but the market has changed and it is not guaranteed that your short-term rental will make you money at all. In fact, many short-term rentals have become money pits. While the tax incentives can be amazing and potentially life-changing for some of you, you can't go into this recklessly. And a lot of your success in life comes down to who you know and what you know and the wisdom you can gather from these sources before you get started. And I'm incredibly lucky to have a fantastic guest who has consulted with people in our network, and I've heard wonderful things on how to find the proper Airbnb rental. Because I'll tell you right now, and you can go, I'm going to put the links in the show notes, and you'll see all sorts of content we have on the short-term rental loophole and how amazing it is for reducing your taxes. But before you get so excited, before you purchase that rental, you want to make sure you have a game plan to profit. So, John, can you introduce yourself in 60 seconds or less? And we're going to talk with John today on how you can buy this amazing tax advantage asset that will offset even your W-2 income and your business income and even capital gains income, and how you can do this without losing your shirt and actually generating profit on something that reduces your taxes. John, why don't you introduce yourself in 60 seconds or less?
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, for having me on the show. I genuinely appreciate it. My name is John Bianchi. Online, I go as the Airbnb data guy. I have made it my mission to ensure that everybody knows how to analyze and understand Airbnb data so that they can buy profitable short-term rentals and, more importantly, avoid all those money pits that you were just talking about, right? My track record is that I worked as the head of data for the largest short-term rental investment fund in America, and I helped them find over 150 properties in less than 2 years. Every single last one of those single family homes is a profitable property. And the proof of that is that they have now gone to raise money from institutional funds. They got vetted by an institutional fund for 19 months. And when you do that, they see every single nook and cranny. And that institutional fund has now helping raise another $100 million over the next 3 to 5 years for that company. And so to me, that's the best way to prove that what I did on the data side to find those properties, it actually worked out. And about 19 to 20 months ago, we actually opened up our own, I opened up my own company called STR Search, where I help everybody and anybody who is looking to be able to find a short-term rental, but needs help actually understanding the data to find the best possible property and how to get it set it up and how to actually manage it properly. And so I have a service where I do it for you. And I'm not educating people. All my training, all my coaching is 100% free. I've created 4 free courses teaching people about how to understand Airbnb data. But if you want the option to hire me, you have that option through my company, STR Search. So that's me. That's my track record. There's a lot more to that story, but you only gave me 60 seconds. So there you go.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. I know you feel the pressure right now, but trust me, if you watch some of our earlier episodes, the introduction becomes the episode. And I go into La La Land. So not like you would do that. I'm just saying that's our, but anyways, and to catch some of you up to speed here, there's a short-term rental loophole where if the average length of stay is 7 days or less and you do what's called material participation, and that's defined in some other content, you have the ability to create non-passive losses that can offset any type of income that you may have. And these losses can be in the hundreds of thousands, and we accelerate that with cost segregation studies. And if you don't know what that is, it gives you the opportunity to write off a good chunk of the property in year 1 from that cost set. And if you want more details, don't worry, all that'll be in the show notes. We're going to dive in today, though, on the profit element of this, because we don't want to buy things just to reduce our taxes. This has to make profit for us. This has to be a wealth building vehicle so we can reinvest into more assets that further reduce our taxes here. Now, before we talk about how you do what you do and what you listeners who are thinking about getting started or want to improve at short-term rental investing can do, let's talk about where people go wrong. What are the mistakes that we see happening? Where is the misinformation? What do you see as are common pitfalls to avoid when getting started with short-term rental investing?
All right. So the first one is people are not using data at all. So they don't even know that AirDNA exists. Okay. But if you do know that AirDNA exists, do you know what AirDNA is, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're okay. Just want to make sure. Some people don't even know that exists, and they go out and they go and buy a property without ever taking a look at the data. And your chances of being successful with that is very, very slim, like extraordinarily slim. So that's the first mistake. The second mistake is that they use AirDNA, but they don't understand the difference between good data and bad data, right? So on AirDNA, it's just an algorithm that is recording the calendar of every single Airbnb every single day. And that algorithm is not perfect. And so to get what we call good data, you actually need a full-time host that has been managing for almost a full year, because the algorithm is going to record that calendar every single day moving forward and track to see exactly how much I think it's making. And you need it that host to be full time, because once they're part time, the data gets really, really wonky. And you need it to be almost a full year, because anything less and the predictions of how much it's going to make over a full year also get screwed up. And so you can do that by, on AirDNA, they have something called days available. And you just want to see that that's over 270 days. You can even use a filter that removes anybody who hasn't had their list being available for over 271 days, right? So that's the first way to get almost a full year. And then you want to make sure that they have at least 20 reviews at a minimum, but you also want to make sure that they have at least 1 to 3 reviews over the past 12 months. And that's going to tell you that they're a full-time host. Okay, so now you have, to get good data, we have almost a full year and a full-time host. And that combination is how we avoid looking at data that is inaccurate, that'll lead you down the wrong path. So those are 2 quick things. And I could keep going, but I feel like you want to ask me a question.
Oh, no. Continue.
Okay, keep going. Okay, sorry. The third one that people make is a couple of routes I can go here. The way I always like to explain this is that Airbnb is a business. And with Airbnbs, there's actually a lot of competition, right? Almost every single market has a handful of competitors now. And I grew up in a town where almost every single corner had a different pizza shop on it. It was a very Italian place. It was built by Italians, pizza everywhere. Everyone talks about it, right? Now, if I were to go into this town, my hometown, and open up a pizza shop, but not ever take a look at the other pizza shops, how they were marketing, how good their pizza was, what they were offering, what their pricing was, if they did slices, if they did larges, what a king looked like, anything. If I didn't learn about my competition and then I just went into that market and opened up a pizza shop, I would be a moron. You know what I mean? It would be a really, really bad move on my part. And Airbnb, people are getting into Airbnbs and treating it the exact same way. They are quite literally not looking at any of their competition to figure out what their competition is doing, what kind of amenities they're offering, what is the style that they're offering, how many people they're sleeping, what their cleaning fees are, what their nightly rates are going for in the off season or the peak season, on the weekday versus the weekend. And they're doing none of this research to truly understand who they're going up against in this competitive Airbnb market. And they're just opening up a home, furnishing it, and falling way, way behind. Like just on day one, they're already light years behind because they either overpaid, wrong location, didn't design properly, or didn't take the right photos or price it properly or whatever it may be. And then they're wondering why the property is not making money. And it's like, well, you didn't do your homework, right? So those are the handful of things that I think people are making the biggest mistake right off the bat. And I know I'm being a little bit harsh, but I'm being harsh because when you're harsh, it tends to get people to actually take action rather than, being a little soft with it. So any questions on that, Mark?
Nope.
Okay.
I've seen this as well. What I see from my clients, and you have a larger sample size that you've evaluated, but a lot of our clients, they get so excited. They listen to a podcast or, Bigger Pockets. They get so excited by the possibilities and how the numbers could be and how profitable this could be, that they get a little reckless. They don't even consider the possibility that this beautiful short-term rental could be cash flow negative.
Yep. And a lot of the times they convince themselves that it is going to be cash flow positive, right? They get so excited, because there's a lot of nuances to Airbnb, and it's a lot more than a long-term rental. Long-term rental is, if I have a 2-bedroom, and then I go and look to see what the other 2 bedrooms are renting for. They're all renting for $2,000 a month. They go, okay, well, I'm going to rent this for $2,000 a month, and I'm going to make $24,000 throughout the full year. That's it, right? But a short-term rental, if you just have good photos instead of great photos, you can make $20,000, $30,000 less on your property simply because of photos. You can have everything else dialed in perfectly, but you hired a bad photographer, or even a good photographer, but not a great photographer. So there's so many variables,
Yeah. So, obviously there's the operational part of this where you got to set up really good operations and marketing of your rentals. When it comes to finding, what are some of the things, and we talked about, in the pitfalls here, and some of the things you kind of reference here is that making sense of the data and understanding where the data could mislead you based on the seasonality and availability of the properties. For someone who's listening now, and let's say they've never purchased their short-term rental or have a short-term rental or a few of them, what are some really valuable things that they can start doing that they likely haven't been doing? And what are some foundational things that you think that are some key points that you can consider when you're trying to find the best short-term rental to get started? How do I know that this listing is the right listing for me and that I can generate profit?
That question is a very long answer, right?
So let's
So
give
see if I
let's
break it down.
yeah, we could do just the top. If you could pick the top three ish, I know that's a loaded
Yeah,
question for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, the to give you context on that, I created a course teaching people how to do this, right, for free, and it was 40 hours long. So there's the answer you just the question you just asked is a 40-hour long answer. But I'll give the very, very high level notes. So step one, you got to figure out what market is actually going to turn a profit for you, right? One of the other big mistakes we see people do is they pick a market that they actually like to vacation in, and I find that to be almost always a mistake because for a variety of reasons. Most markets, okay, are not cash flow positive markets for short-term rentals. I've studied over 350 different markets, like probably around 400 at this point, and we have somewhere around 20 different markets we help our clients into. So just to put that in perspective, right? The odds of you being able to find a market that's actually profitable, it just happens to be your favorite vacation spot, is extremely low. Okay. So just sharing that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what market could you go into where you could actually turn a profit with this property. And what I have found to be the fastest way to be able to know if a market has any cash flow potential is by using something called a 20% rule. This is not 20% cash on cash. It's 20% price to rent ratio, meaning purchase price to revenue. So if I buy a home for 500,000, can it make 100,000? Okay. It's not a perfect rule, and it's only supposed to be used when looking into a market from a 20-foot or from a 10,000-foot view. And the idea is that if I look into this market and I look to see, and I can see that, 4 bedrooms with a pool are selling for 500,000, can I very quickly and high level see that on AirDNA, those same type of properties are making roughly $100,000? If I can generally see that from a very quick glance, maybe it takes me half an hour to figure that out, then I know that that's a market that's worth deep diving. Okay. Most of the time, you're not going to find that, right? About 95% of the time, you're not going to find that. But when you do find it, that's where you put that onto a short list of markets. You go, that's the market I'm going to build a buy box for. And I'm going to deep dive and I'm going to rip it apart because I know there's opportunity there. And so that leads us to step two, which is building out a buy box. And in step two, what you do is you literally just study every single Airbnb that exists in that market. You review them all. You figure out, you figure out the revenue drivers for those properties. That's the key thing. Okay. When you study a market to build a buy box, you're trying to understand what drives revenue. Okay. And the best way to do this is to find the most plain home that's making the same amount as beautiful homes. Okay. Everyone in every single market, these exist. There are regular homes, regular siding, not even high ceilings in there, whatever it is. But the listing is put together so well that it's performing as well as these luxury looking properties. And it's only because this person understood how they could drive revenue from this listing through color, through amenities, through photos, through whatever you want to call it. They figured it out. And that listing will tell you the most about how to drive revenue for that market. Okay. You write all this down. You make notes on everything that you're seeing because those are the things that are going to drive revenue for you. And so now you've built out a buy box. And then from there, what you want to do is you want to start looking for the properties that match your buy box, that match that property's criteria, that drives revenue, whatever that may be. And so now when you're hunting for all these properties, you want to find them. You want to try and forecast what you believe the revenue is going to be. And then once you've been able to forecast what the revenue is, then you can actually underwrite it and know if it's going to be profitable or not. That last step that I just explained there, you repeat that as many times until it's memorized in your head over and over again, and you find an outlier. Because you'll do it 100 times on 100 properties, and you're going to come across one where the cash on cash and everything is just through the roof in comparison to everything else. And that's how you know you found the absolute outlier. So that's the full breakdown there.
Wonderful.
Finding the market, building a buy box, and hunting for the deal.
And I know there's layers to that and so many ways to execute on what you described as well. And you know, also for those of you guys listening, if you want to dive deeper, I mean, we'll share in the notes and some places where you can get that free course. So John has a really cool YouTube page and awesome content on Instagram. I was checking out as well. And he dives deep into all sorts of investments. I want to get your thoughts on something here. So we recently had a full-time short-term rental investor come on and present to our clients, and we do client workshops. And he was talking about how, and he was doing some investments earlier on in the Smokies, and I'm sure you see lots of people get very excited about the Smokies at one point. And he was saying, you know, most of you guys are gonna, you know, think that you can just go walk right into the Smokies and buy this place, and you're just gonna be rolling in money, and you know you can really lose a lot of money in the Smokies. And he was saying, you know, most of these markets, in a lot of these markets, you know, kind of like what you were pointing to, aren't going to give you nearly as much of an ROI as you think, and they're going to give you a lot of headache dealing with the guests. You know, he had one listing that generates, you know, maybe six figures in profit, but the headaches associated, he called it like a return on headache. So like the type of interactions you need for such a large, massive luxury, you know, event space / rental, to him isn't nearly as valuable as he has found as finding just some place in a metropolis. He has like, he compares that to like, he has like a 4-unit property in the suburbs of Charlotte in South Carolina. That's just money, and is easy money, and it flows like crazy, right? What are your thoughts on maybe how is the audience, you know, and you kind of pointed out to this, how does the audience, how do you identify that this is the right market, and are these vacation rental hubs of all these log cabins, is that no longer the way to go, or are some of them the way to go? Where are you seeing as far as how people are picking the right markets to invest in here?
Yeah. We've got a lot of experience with answering that exact question, because when we first opened our doors at STR Search to work with everybody and anybody, we just thought we had to bring beautiful deals, like amazing deals. We're like, hey, here's a great deal, and everyone would just buy them. What we quickly learned is that everybody has preferences. Every single person has a preference. They may want it to be in a city. They may want it to be in a metro, a mountain town. They want a beach town. They want a blue state. They want a red state. They want, you know, a bigger property, a smaller property. They have all these different things that they care about, and what they care about determines what market they're going to end up in, right? A very sort of broad way to think about this is that if the market is what I would consider like a Class A travel destination, such as a Gatlinburg, it's extraordinarily difficult to find a cash flowing property in Class A vacation market. So any market that you could just like think of across America that would be considered like a travel destination or a short-term rental market, those are extraordinarily difficult because everybody thinks about those first, right? They are the biggest ones. And people have been investing in those ones forever, but COVID really lit all of those up like crazy. And a lot of people went into them. And they've gotten to the point where the home prices have raised so high that they met the amount of cash flow that could be made in those markets. Okay. This happens in almost every market that blows up. So let's say that, you know, the homes at one point were selling for 500,000. If you bought it, you could make $50,000 in cash flow. Well, once somebody figures that out, they're willing to offer 550 on that exact same property because they're going to make still a good amount of cash flow. And then the next person sees that and they're willing to offer 600, then 700, then 800. Then all of a sudden, there's no cash flow left. So when we talk about these Class A markets, most of those, what I just explained, has already happened in those markets. And so for me personally, when I look at those, I don't really care for them that much, right? I think we've helped invest 2 properties in those types of markets over the 260 homes that we've helped invest in so far. Only 2. So if you're going to be going looking for a market, always keep that in mind. If you hear an influencer talking about a market online and they're saying how great it is and all that stuff, there's usually a reason behind it, right? I usually like to avoid those markets like the plague because everybody under the sun is going to go to them. Everyone with dumb money is going to go to them and think it's like the next best thing, but it almost always isn't in the long run. So anyways, I know I'm not answering your question directly, but I'm answering the Gatlinburg question.
Yeah, this is actually really great insight.
Okay. The next step is, if you're trying to figure out what market to go into, pick a market you love. Airbnbs are not just black and white investments. It's not like buying a stock. It's not like buying a long-term rental. You got to put a little bit of your heart into it. You got to care about it. You got to love it a little bit. And the more that you actually have a love for the area, the better that property is going to turn out, almost always, because you actually want it to be done really well. And almost think of yourself as the main person who would be renting it out, and cater it to yourself, because you understand yourself better than anybody else, and you're going to create an experience better than if you were to go to a place you didn't care about. So as an example, if you love like a remote cabin in the middle of nowhere, right, but it's somewhat close to a little bit of a travel destination, but you can get a bunch of secluded land, and like that's something that you love, and you've rented out cabins like that before, if you then buy something like that, you know how to make it a beautiful experience. But if I'm somebody who only has ever invested or been to major cities like Austin, New York, LA, and then all of a sudden I'm trying to like create an experience that's out in the middle of the woods and I don't even like camping, the chances of me doing that right is really, really low, right? Like really low. And so then therefore, pick something that you like. If you like the mountains, go to the mountains. If you like the beaches, go to the beaches. Because there's profitable properties all over the place in these different types of categories of properties. And then find markets in those general areas, and then take that 20% rule that I was telling you about to figure out if the market is worth deep diving and continue that process that I was referring to.
Awesome. Now, what would you say to someone who says, well, I'm not really that crazy about short-term rentals, but the tax savings looks great. Can't you just find me something that I know will do all right? I'm only going to materially participate in year one and probably hand off to a property manager because I got this business over here that's taking up all my time. And I just want to be left alone after year one because it sounds so exhausting. What do you say to a guy like that?
Those are my favorite clients in the world. Those are the best guys ever, right? Those are basically the people that we work with.
Those are our clients too.
Yeah, those are our clients. Those are probably 80% of our clients are that, right? A lot of what I've been talking to right now are the people who want to do it themselves. But the people who are not wanting to do that, they're so easy. We just go, hey, look at this is giving you the return, this X return. It's a good market. It's a growing market. It's, we kind of lay out all the investment side to it, and they go, sounds good. You know what I mean? I'll get it. We make sure they put it together in the way that makes most logical sense. They generally, I will say though, even those people will still have a bit of a preference. They will still say, I prefer Florida over the mountains. And we go, okay, sounds good. Or I like upstate New York over Florida. We go, okay, sounds good. So there's still a little bit of guidance on which way they will end up. But we ultimately will just show them the property. They follow our system. They get the property. They get the material participation, and then they start using our property manager the following year, as long as they meet the requirements and all that kind of stuff. Because I know there's a little bit of trickery when it comes to making sure they're doing it the right way. So I'm not a CPA, but just letting you know that's what they do.
Awesome. And to give you guys a high level overview to fill you in what he's saying here, you need to materially participate in the short-term rental for those losses to be non-passive and offset your other income sources. There are 7 attributes. One of those 7 has to be true. The most common of those that you will see is that you and your spouse combined for at least 100 hours, and no other cleaner puts in more time than you or other person. And then the other test that is going to be most common is that you and or your spouse put in 500 hours. If you put in 500 hours into the day-to-day, you don't have to worry about anyone else's hours. Now, there's a lot more to it and other things to consider here, but it just is a high level. So that's why in at least year one when you buy it, because that's usually when you want to do your cost segregation and use those losses and create those losses. That's why we care so much about this.
Yeah.
What about what about for folks who say, this is actually going to be a midterm rental, but I'm going to price it and market it as a short-term rental in year one, so I can use those non-passive losses, and then we'll attract nurses, like traveling nurses and other people for longer stays in the future where there's less upkeep because there's less turnover. It's still really profitable, more profitable than a long-term rental. What are your thoughts on that as a strategy?
I'm not against it. I just don't do it, and I don't know it, and I don't pretend like I do. I know it. I personally am not a fan because you have, for most of those midterm rentals to work out to get the clientele that you want, like the construction workers or the hospitality nurses. Typically, you have to have some sort of relationship that you have like the go-to person who's looking to place all these people in some sort of midterm rental, and you have to make that relationship to get the bookings. And I've never wanted to make the relationship. if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
never wanted to have to do that. I would rather just post on Airbnb and people come through, and I don't have to like cater to one person to make that one person happy to be able to get people in my place. That's my I know my own personality, right? So then therefore short-term rentals make more sense. So I've never studied midterm rentals. I'm not against the strategy. I know tons of people who have done it, but I don't help anybody do it because I don't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about what could go wrong, and then how to properly find something that's going to give you cash flow and profit. When you choose the right property, the right short-term rental investment, and you've done your research and you make the right decision based on, then the appropriate decision for that investor, what's the result that we see for the investor and for folks when you take the time and you know what you're doing and you pick the right short-term rental? What does that look like from a cash flow, profitability, and opportunity perspective?
I can speak to our clients. I can't speak to everybody else. So for what we're typically able to find our clients on the low cash on cash, it tends to be around an 8 to a 10% cash on cash. And on the high, it tends to be around a 17 to a 20% cash on cash. So we that's typically where we fall. And that could be for, investing $200,000 or $400,000. It's typically the exact same type of return. It's just different markets that you're going into and different strategies and different abilities to write off more taxes by buying more expensive properties and things along those lines. But that's typically where we end up for the clients that work with us.
Right. And so a cash on cash. So for instance, a 10% would be if we put in 100,000, we're getting $10,000 a year in cash flow. Now, what you get, one of the things we can think about here is we're not a cash on cash return is great. And at the same time, however, there's other benefits aside from the cash flow. That property is going to appreciate in value over time. You're building wealth as you're paying down the mortgage, and the value of the property goes up over time. So now you're building equity and wealth that is going to be treated in a very tax advantaged manner. You could probably sell the property and get the favorable long-term cap gain and or defer indefinitely with a 1031 exchange. So you're building wealth while creating cash flow as well. In fact, I would say, we have some folks that didn't have good cash flow. Maybe they didn't pick the best rental, but even then, if they just hold it long enough, the equity pay down, the mortgage pay down, the equity growth is still generating wealth. Obviously, you want to have a cash flow, but you're still building wealth from all these other opportunities of just owning the real estate.
Agreed. If I could get my 2 cents on that, right? I do agree with what you're saying. Obviously, with short-term rentals, you can take advantage of a short-term rental tax loophole, which can save you on day one, $50 to $100, even $200,000 in taxes that you would have given to Uncle Sam anyways, right? So that's a huge part of the return and one of the greatest benefits about short-term rentals. But I always like to hyper focus on cash flow, because if I buy a long-term rental, with a long-term rental, you get appreciation and you get principal pay down, right? So you get both those things no matter what. And with a short-term rental, you get the same thing, but the cash flow is the main difference. And so then therefore, if I hyper focus on the cash flow, because you are going to have to put more work into the property. And so if you hyper focus on trying to find a property that can have strong cash flow, that makes it worth the additional effort in comparison to a long-term rental. But obviously that tax saving is a huge reason why a lot of people are still moving forward with short-term rentals, regardless. But I always like to just hyper focus on cash flow. If we do that, everything else will take care of itself. You'll get the tax savings, you get the depreciation, you'll pay down the property, and the property will pay for itself and make you money year after year.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And ideally, you invest, you get a year one tax refund from your investment, and that gives you cash in your pocket. You get cash flow that's adding to it as well. And you may even do a cash out refi if the interest rates are right and get more of your cash back. And what you do here is you reinvest into more short-term rentals that further drive down your taxes and further build your portfolio of cash building rental properties. And here's a way where we have all these combined benefits of the tax savings, potential refis, and the cash flow to really accelerate the growth of our wealth and help you guys achieve your goals faster through to either retire or quit your jobs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and there's two other additional benefits to cash flow that I always want to point out, because I hear this all the time with people who are like, I get so much in tax savings, I could care less about cash flow. Drives me nuts when I hear that, just so you know. Drives me nuts. I understand it to a certain degree, but drives me nuts. And here's why. if you have a property that loses you money, let's say it's even $1,000, $2,000 a month, right? Because a lot of people have Airbnbs where they are losing that kind of money. Eventually, you will have lost the amount that you have saved in taxes, right? So if you, let's say you got $100,000 in savings, well, if your property loses $25,000, or sorry, $25,000 a year, in 4 years, you're back to square one and you had to manage this property the entire time. Now, your property may have appreciated, right? We don't know exactly what sort of the market may have done, but it most likely will have appreciated as long as we didn't hit another 2008 rate during that 4-year cycle. But you have essentially wiped out all of your tax savings and taken on this additional property just in the hopes that it appreciates, right? Whereas if it actually cash flowed for you, even if it just cash flowed $1,000 for you a month, right? You're up $12,000 year after year, and all of your tax savings you've been able to keep and use for something else, right? Obviously, it's not as directly correlated as I'm making it sound, but you get the general idea. That's the first thing, right? Why it's so important. Oh, sorry. What I'm trying to lead to here is that I don't want any of my clients to have to be forced to sell their property at the worst possible time. And if you lose money year after year and eventually you've wiped out all your tax savings, you're eventually going to go, why am I holding on to this property, right? Why don't I sell it and try and find another one, 1031 exchange it into a different property? And you may get caught where you're actually having to sell it at the worst possible time. Because what if the market does dip? What if the market that you're in, it does go down a little bit, right? I always play worst case scenario because I went through COVID with 15 Airbnbs and it just in the middle of a city and it just wiped out my portfolio overnight. And so the reality is that if you plan for that worst case scenario, you're going to be in a lot better of a position. If your property can cash flow for year after year, and then we hit some sort of time where it's not ideal, if you're cash flowing, let's say $30,000 a year, your property can lose $30,000 in revenue and still break even during a recession. And then you can hold that property during the recession time period until we get to the boom, which is on the back end. And then you can continue to hold that property. And then you have the option to hold it for as long as you want and then sell it whenever that time comes, rather than being forced because it no longer makes financial sense to hold on to. And anybody who holds on to real estate for 20 years looks like a genius, right? And so that's kind of the beauty and the strategy of cash flow, and why focusing on cash flow over the other things tends to make a lot more sense, because you're still going to get them all, and then allows you to have a better long-term plan. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen the opposite happen, especially earlier on, where we would take on anyone who would be willing to pay us a buck, and where folks bought these short-term rentals. We did the costs as we created the losses. They got this great refund, and then they're cash flow negative. And then they're forced to sell because they just can't afford these money pits anymore. And even if you sell at a loss, you're still paying taxes on the recapture of the depreciation. So, and like they may not even be able to afford the taxes on the appreciation because they've just been dumping all this money into the short-term rental. So you certainly don't want to have that happen. And that's why what you share and your information is so incredibly important, especially people starting off, so they can avoid these incredibly expensive mistakes.
Incredibly expensive just to get a little, tax savings. That was nice in the moment, but long-term pain after it. And again, it can all, like, this is the thing that I always like to share, is that I'm living proof that your Airbnbs are not dead. I'm living proof, because every single Airbnb that I have helped somebody acquire is a profitable Airbnb. Every single one of them, 260 something at this point over a 3.5, 4-year period, right? And so then therefore, Airbnbs are not dead. They're just hard. It's harder to actually find them. That my business would not exist. There would be no need for me and all of this education if it was easy to find Airbnbs, but they're difficult. But if you can put in the time to understand the data, understand the information, you can get to the point of actually finding a property that has a moat around it, that has revenue drivers, and you can invest into it and will turn a profit, give you the tax savings and everything else that you want over that long run. So just do the homework. Just sit down, do the homework, right? It's a free 7-hour course on my website that teaches you everything that I just talked about. It's a 7-day challenge. Can't recommend it enough.
Okay, so now let's dive into some of the most frequently asked questions on this topic. So I'm going to give you 5 rapid fire questions that you're going to be tempted to, that you're going to we could probably spend hours on each question, but we'll do our best here. Okay, first question, and we've kind of talked about this already. That's okay. First question. Can you really make money with Airbnb and short-term rentals?
Without a doubt, I'm living proof of that. Every single last property that I've helped acquire over the past 3.5 years are all profitable. You just have to do your homework to really study the data and get the right property.
What is a good ROI or return on investment for a short-term rental property?
Really going to depend on the person and what you are using as your metric. Are you using total return or are you using cash on cash, right? If you're using cash on cash, some people would be happy with a 5% cash on cash. We are typically able to find somewhere between an 8 to a 10 on the low and a 17 to 20 on the high. And most people are happy with that. But anything around 10, 15, most people will be happy to move forward with the property like that.
What are the most important metrics to analyze a profitable Airbnb or short-term rental?
Does the property have the ability to cash flow? If it can cash flow, you can continue to hold onto that property for as long as you need to and sell it whenever that time comes. There are a lot of benefits to ensuring that the short-term rental actually turns a profit on a monthly basis and you're not just getting a tax savings.
What are the best cities and locations to invest in short-term rentals?
You want to invest in ideally not the A-class markets. So markets that are less known, that maybe have less travelers in total, but there is a ton of opportunity to be the best person within that market and stand out from the crowd, and there's still enough demand to turn an actual profit.
How do short-term rental laws and regulations affect profitability?
They only affect, trick question, because the reality is that you don't go into a market that has bad short-term rental regulations. If you found yourself in a market where there's no regulations and then they put regulations in place, it's going to affect your profitability depending on the regulations that they do end up putting in. But ideally, you find a market that already has regulations in place and you play within their rules and everybody is happy and everybody wins.
Awesome. And what question haven't I asked you that I should be asking you?
Is it worth it? Like the headache, right? So a lot of these people are going to be getting a short-term rental, and it's not passive, right? And so the question should be like, somebody who really wants tax savings, they're a high W-2 earner, they want to figure out how to not give all their money to Uncle Sam, and they want to do a short-term rental, but they haven't done one before. What should they expect? Is it really going to be worth it? And there's one way that I always like to explain this, and I like to say it's like jumping over a fence. Getting an Airbnb is like jumping over a fence, okay? It's hard to jump over a fence, but once you're over the fence, you're just walking. And that's what it's like getting an Airbnb. Up front, it's a whack load of work to find the right place, to get it set up the right way, and then to figure out the operations to make sure that you're managing the guests properly. It's a lift. It's like jumping over a fence. But once you have it all set up and you have the right property and you have the right automations in place, it's so simple, especially if you have one. You get a dedicated cleaner who knows what they're doing. They take care of your property, or a dedicated point person. And between messaging and figuring out the nightly rates and things like that to actually take care of everything from the laptop anywhere in the world, it's pretty easy to do, especially because almost all of it is automated, and even AI is automating a lot of the messaging too. And so it's going to feel like a lot, but then it's going to be running itself for about 80% of the time. And then you're just good to go. And that's pretty well it. And as soon as that happens, you're going to want another one. As soon as you get to that point where you're just walking, after hopping over that fence, you're going to be like, I could do another one of these. And you're going to forget what it's like to go through that first part. It's like having a baby, you know what I mean? A woman is pregnant and she pops out a baby, and then a year goes by and she's like, I'll do it again. Right? So anyways, that's the question that everybody always wonders.
That's a really great insight. Now, our audience is likely going to be interested in knowing how they can hire you and what that looks like. How does this work if we want to engage with you?
So you would go to my website, strsearch.com, right? strsearch.com, and simply schedule a call with somebody on my team, and they will explain to you exactly what it's like to work with us. We work on a flat fee. We are not brokers, so we don't take money on the close of a property. We do that intentionally right now. And so we take an upfront fee to be able to work with us, and then we do everything for you. Okay, so we are finding the market for you based on your preferences. We're finding the property for you based on your preferences. We're underwriting every single deal, forecasting the revenue, explaining exactly how it needs to be set up to drive the most revenue out of it, connecting you with lenders, realtors, designers, construction companies, property managers, revenue managers, CPAs, cost segregations, whatever you need. We'll make those connections all the way through, and we're going to work with you to make sure that property comes out as one of the most beautiful properties in that market with all of the revenue drivers and a moat built around it so that it can outperform not only today, but for years from now. And that's the objective. And we're going to help you through the entire process. Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. So strsearch.com for those who are ready to get started. Where's another place where people can go to just learn more about you and maybe take that free course and immerse themselves into the stuff that you share on your insight here?
So I always recommend to still go to strsearch.com, and there's going to be a section on there that says courses, and you can learn about my 7-day Airbnb data challenge, which will teach you everything you need to know: how to find a market, how to build a buy box, how to hunt for properties, how to know what amenities to get, how to forecast the revenue, how to underwrite. Teach you everything, give you all the resources you need. It's 100% free. You don't even have to give your email to go through the course. Okay. Just lives on the website. It's free. Go through it. It's the best resource out there for this if you want to learn how to do it yourself. Hands down, I'm not just saying that. Find me a better one is what I'd love to see. But anyway.
Awesome. Well, John, and for those of you listening in your car, all this will be in the notes as well. And I really hope that you guys get a chance to check this stuff out here. John has a wealth of information, and especially for you busy folks out there, here's a shortcut you could take in building your wealth, and obviously all the tax savings that comes along the way with that. John, thank you so much for your time. And for those of you listening, if you want to learn more about how this fits into your advanced tax reduction planning strategies, you can go to prosperalcpa.com. It's prosper with an L, cpa.com/apply for a free consultation where we can assess how much we can save you in taxes with our strategies. And if you're just getting started and you want an introduction into what advanced tax planning means and how that could apply to you, go to taxplanningchecklist.com. John, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.